You tried to forget them. You stopped making du'a for them. You cut the ties. You even told yourself, if they were meant for me, Allah would have made it easier. But no matter how many steps you take away from them, your heart keeps circling back. And you don't know if it's love or a test, a whisper or a sign. You keep praying for clarity. You keep begging Allah to take the feeling away, if it's not right. But the more you try to move on, the heavier your chest feels. But here's what you're not asking yourself. What if the reason you can't move on isn't because you're weak, but because Allah is still guiding you? What if the emotional delay isn't heartbreak, but a test? In this video, we're going to walk through 5 signs that someone may genuinely be written for you. Not based on wishful thinking, but on the way Allah sometimes unfolds clarity through patience, not immediacy. Some of these signs will feel confronting. One of them will sound exactly like what you're doing right now, and by the end, you'll know whether to hold on or finally let go. Sign number 1. You tried to let go, but it didn't bring you peace. You thought it would get easier. You whispered their name one last time in du'a, then asked Allah to remove them from your heart. You deleted the chats. You stopped checking if they viewed your stories. You even told yourself, if it's written for me, it'll come back. And when it didn't, you tried to accept that maybe that was your sign, that the silence meant closure, that the pain was just a symptom of attachment, and obedience meant detachment. But still, something felt wrong, not just sadness, not longing, something deeper, like you disconnected from them, but also from a part of yourself. And that's the part no one talks about. That sometimes doing the right thing still leaves you hurting. That sometimes, even when you let go for the sake of Allah, peace doesn't arrive immediately. It's delayed, or worse, it disappears entirely. And you wonder, was it weakness? Was it obsession? Was it shaitan? Or was it something you weren't meant to interpret yet? Because here's what many people don't realize. Sometimes, when you walk away from someone, Allah lets the pain linger. Not because they're right for you, but because your heart isn't ready for what comes next. The heartbreak isn't punishment, it's surgery. It's the emotional swelling that comes before healing. When Allah is cutting ties between you and the version of yourself that was still clinging, still scared, still building your future around someone who hasn't even arrived. You're not being punished for moving on. You're being softened. And that softness, that ache, that inability to completely forget, maybe it's not because they're written for you. Maybe it's because what Allah wants to give you requires your heart to be stretched first. Because some stories don't begin at love, they begin at surrender. And if you're in that place right now, where every attempt to move on has only brought you deeper confusion, then you need to hear this next sign. Because what happens after you stop trying to control it is usually when Allah starts to show you why your du'a had to take this path first. Sign number 2. The signs didn't shout, they whispered. You were waiting for something loud, a dream, a verse, a lightning bolt of certainty that would erase the doubt. But instead, you got patterns, moments that didn't make sense at the time but wouldn't leave you alone. Delays that aligned too perfectly, a conversation that circled back months later, a gut feeling that kept resurfacing when you tried to walk away. And the irony, you kept calling them coincidences, just because they weren't loud enough to convince your logic. But when Allah writes something for you, it doesn't always show up in neon. It shows up in silence, and only the ones who are spiritually awake notice it. Because this isn't about obsession, or fantasy, or ego. It's about subtle divine orchestration, the kind that can only be felt when your heart is still and your eyes aren't blinded by your own timeline. You thought clarity would come with speed, but in the Quran, clarity often came with delay. And be patient, for indeed, Allah does not allow the reward of those who do good to be lost. The goodness was never just in getting the person. It was in becoming the version of you that was ready for them. That's why some people disappear when your Ameen drops, and reappear when your du'a matures. And maybe the reason the feeling is still there is because Allah isn't showing you them. He's showing you you. But here's what you didn't expect. The more you prayed for distance, the more your character started evolving. Not for them, not to impress, but quietly, in private, when no one was watching. And that's when the real question hits you. Are they the sign, or just the trigger for the version of you Allah was always preparing? Sign 3. You're not in love. You're just still attached to what felt safe. You weren't smiling when you thought of them. You weren't even hopeful. You were steady, stabilized, just calm enough not to spiral again. And somewhere along the way, you called that love, but maybe it wasn't love. Maybe it was the first time your anxiety had a face it could rest beside. The first time your loneliness had a name to whisper. The first time your heart felt like it wasn't just yours to carry anymore. That's what safety feels like after pain. It's not intense. It's not passionate. It's quiet, familiar, healing, even if it was wrong, even if it was temporary, even if Allah pulled you away. Because you weren't just attached to them. You were attached to the version of you they helped you survive as. And that kind of attachment, it's the hardest to let go of. Not because you want them back, but because you want you back. The version of you that wasn't so scared, that had something to look forward to, that didn't feel this lost. But here's the danger most people never name. When you confuse emotional stability with divine compatibility, you start making du'a for someone who's already become your comfort zone. And comfort zones don't grow you. They keep you still, addicted, spiritually delayed. You think you're waiting on love, but what you're really doing is waiting for that moment in your past to come back and save you again. Allah doesn't return a soul to what merely felt good. He returns you to what brings you nearer to Him. And perhaps you love a thing, and it is bad for you. And Allah knows, while you know not. That's why real love in Islam isn't supposed to numb you. It's supposed to refine you, sharpen your character, test your forbearance, elevate your taqwa. As the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, a believer is not stung from the same hole twice. So if all this person did was give you emotional silence in your storm, they may have been a mercy, yes. But they were never meant to be your mission, because Allah doesn't send soulmates to hold you in place. Allah sends them when you're finally ready to move forward, with Him at the center. So now here's the question no one wants to ask. If this wasn't love, then why can't you let go? Sign number 4. Sometimes the person is right, but the timing is Allah's. So, why can't you let go? Maybe it's not obsession. Maybe it's not weakness. Maybe it's that your soul knows something your mind doesn't, and what you're calling confusion is actually divine timing. Because sometimes the person is written for you, but right now they're not ready for you, or you're not ready for them, and Allah is still writing the in-between. But that's the hardest thing to accept, isn't it? Not rejection, not heartbreak, but delay. Because delay feels like punishment. It feels like silence. It feels like being left behind while the rest of the world moves on. And your nafs tells you to interpret that silence as a no. But what if it's not a no? Just not yet. You saw the signs. You felt the connection. You even made du'a. But now, you're watching them drift. They got busy. They got distant. You even saw them liking someone else's posts. And every second your phone stays silent, you assume it's over. But here's what you're not considering. What if the connection was real, but Allah paused it? Because you asked for something greater? You asked for someone who would protect your heart, who would carry your deen, who would build Jannah with you. And maybe the only way to give you that version of them was to separate you, before you settled for the unfinished version. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Know that if the entire nation were to gather to benefit you with something, they would not benefit you except with what Allah has already written for you." So if this person is written, then not even distance can erase them. And if they're not, then not even effort can force it. Your job isn't to predict the future, it's to trust the delay. The Quran reminds us, but perhaps you hate a thing, and it is good for you. And perhaps you love a thing, and it is bad for you. And Allah knows, while you know not. That love you felt might have been real. But real love doesn't always mean right now. Sometimes the test is not in letting go, it's in waiting without forcing. Because love that's rushed before Allah makes it halal, turns into regret. But love that's surrendered, if it's written, comes back with rahmah. Some people aren't removed from your life because they're wrong for you. They're removed so you both can become right for each other. So maybe it wasn't bad timing. Maybe it was perfect mercy. The only question now is whether your heart still knows the difference. Sign 5, the sign that appears only when you're ready to let go or finally hold on. Sometimes the clearest signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala don't come when you're begging for them. They come when you finally surrendered, when you stop checking your phone, when you stop chasing what ifs, when you finally say, "Ya Allah, if it's not written, remove it from my heart with gentleness." That's when it happens. Something shifts. Not in the world outside you, but in you. The restlessness turns into calm. The anxiety isn't gone, but it's quiet now. Like a storm that finally passed, and suddenly the sign appears. Maybe it's a prayer you forgot you made, now unfolding in real time. Maybe it's the exact person, but they've come back with different eyes, a different soul. Maybe it's not them at all, but someone else who reminds you what peace was always supposed to feel like. But here's what you'll always notice. There's no more forcing. The sign doesn't pull you into obsession. It doesn't manipulate your emotions. It doesn't demand you guess whether it's a test or a temptation. It feels clean, quiet, mutma'inna. The heart is no longer fighting the outcome, because the soul already surrendered the result. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "And whosoever fears Allah, He will make for him a way out and will provide for him from where he does not expect." Notice the pattern. Fear Allah, let go. Provision comes from the unseen. Sometimes, the right person isn't shown to you until you're not looking for them out of need, but ready to meet them with stability. Because the sign wasn't just about them being ready for you. It was about you becoming ready for a love that doesn't destroy your connection to Allah, but strengthens it. So if you're still praying for a sign, ask yourself this. Have you really surrendered the outcome? Or are you just silently hoping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala agrees with your timeline? Because the truth is, the soul that's meant for you will never require you to delay your peace. And if it's written, you won't have to chase it. You'll grow into it. So if you're still holding on, not because of obsession, not because of fantasy, but because something inside you just won't release it, even after du'a, even after silence, then maybe that pull isn't weakness. Maybe it's a quiet thread that Allah hasn't allowed to snap yet. Not because they're the one, but because you're not done becoming the one yet. Because when Allah writes someone for you, the path to them won't look like shortcuts. It'll look like surrender. You won't chase them in DMS. You'll meet them in du'a. You won't beg them to stay. You'll beg Allah for clarity. And one day, if it's written, you'll both arrive. Not through force, but through obedience. Until then, don't let your heart become addicted to signs. Let it become addicted to becoming, because the clearer you become, the clearer everything else will. May Allah guide every heart reading this to the path that leads back to Him. Whether that means returning to someone or finally letting go for real. Drop an Ameen in the comments if your soul needed that clarity. And if you want more content like this, just know your like, comment, and du'a supports this project far more than you think. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.